Deleted station. January 26, 1981. Good evening. Now, every individual alive is intimately concerned at certain levels with all of the national and the global challenges in the political and the social and the religious arena. I do not want to oversimplify, but it is as if each generation or group of generations seeks its own overall things, about which the world will be organized. Those will appear in the private lives of citizens and in private dreams and in national events, or global ones, so that both arenas of activity are always intimately involved. You knew ahead of time the kind of world you would be entering. The challenges that you and Ruber both accepted have been discussed often, and to some extent they mirrored the challenges of the world at large. It is only of late, relatively speaking, that some of those issues have begun to rather clearly show themselves in the arena of public events, however. Ruber found it very difficult to take a public stand as separate from, say, a private one. My book and his, that is, Mass Events and the God of Jane, both do take public stands. They comment clearly on issues that affect individual and private, and national or community behavior. The importance of impulses was stressed in particular, and the acceptance of such an idea is important to Ruber's recovery, of course, but also vital in the behavior of nations. It may seem that nations behave only too impulsively, that, for example, the just-released American hostages were kidnapped as a result of highly impulsive behavior. In fact, that event might only seem to prove that impulsive behavior is basically aggressive, undependable, and chaotic. As a matter of fact, the students took such regrettable actions not because they gave into impulsive behavior, but because the road to true impulsive expression had been blocked so long that such actions became one of the few possible ways of giving vent to certain expressions. When you are a hostage, you cannot express your own impulses, of course. Your free will is highly curtailed for all practical purposes. It is curtailed because the number of impulses are so drastically reduced by circumstances. Whenever and for whatever reasons you block the normally free flow of impulses, you also curtail the exercise of free will. For free will involves you in the experience of choosing between the actualization of one impulse or another. The captors then cut down on the freedom of the hostages by reducing the number of impulses to which the hostages could respond. This is all so clear that it is difficult to express step by step. The telling itself makes the affair seem complex. But whether or not you are dealing with private behavior, with the treatment of one person in regard to his or her own impulses, or whether you are dealing with a mass event of political nature, involving the enforced blockage of impulses on the part of one group toward another, you are necessarily cutting down on the exercise of free will. In a way, the external politics of the situation within your country is helping Ruber to understand his own position far better than he did earlier. It is helping him clarify some issues. There were always two phases to his endeavors: the private search for understanding and the public expression as a writer. In a fashion, this applies to most endeavors of a creative kind. The painter's painting is a result of a private search, but in a gallery it becomes a public expression. Largely, for I am simplifying here to some considerable degree, But largely, Ruber felt little difficulties to be encountered in his private search, but in their public expression, he was far more cautious. It is impossible, of course, to really separate the two, but as his work became better known, the private search became more of a public issue. Years ago, when the gallery of silenced people began to bug him, he felt frightened, afraid that he would become the brunt of fanatics or extremists. He was nevertheless determined to take some kind of a public stand. For not to do so would mean not to express himself through his books at all. He knew he would never give in to that course, but he felt that some of that dates back to childhood habits and beliefs, when his very food and bed was given him by the auspices of the public. He was taught to be very cautious, lest that livelihood be taken away. The only private fears he had were also old ones, having to do with the whole false prophet syndrome, the fear of leading people down the garden path, and so forth. Those private and public arenas became connected, however. He was worried that his nature expression and search, publicly expressed at that point in history, was dangerous because it put him in the gaze of a growing band of fanatics on the one hand, and also roused old fears of a private nature, having to do with the overall validity of revelatory information. He would not stop expressing himself, but immediately felt he needed greater protection. To some extent, he doubted his own vision. See the connection with his difficulty. Despite this, he went on with some considerable courage, determination, and vigor in my book, and his own to encounter the nitty-gritty, so to speak, to bring out the issues clearly to himself and to the world. The information in mass events and in our sessions helped him use impulses to a far better degree than he had before, and helped him keep some balance, let him advance in understanding despite the period of difficulty. Still, at various times and throughout the period, he used what he thought of as that additional protection. The symptoms kept him inside, where it seemed he could indeed express himself with the least duress. At the same time, he was learning that expression denied at one level means expression denied to some extent at all levels, so that, of course, his creative work also suffered to some degree. Realizing that he made considerable efforts to change his attitudes and beliefs, the national situation has somewhat changed. The challenges are more out in the open now. He does not feel that he is involved alone, as he did before. The fanatics, for example, are everywhere, quite visible, and if they might find his work offensive, he is hardly alone. He has, therefore, been involved in the nitty-gritty. This means that he has been encountering his own beliefs, arguing with them, changing them at very elemental levels. You have definite signs of the body's overall positive response. The arms are straighter, the feet stronger, the ankles more flexible, and overall adjustments are constantly being made. With all these, you have the changes in the thighs and hips, so that the muscular rigidity has definitely given away. The entire stance is altering and the situation improving. At the same time, he has been extremely uncomfortable. Each day, the entire body is learning to relax more. The flesh becomes more pliable, and as that occurs in response to his newer beliefs in safety, still, he must reassure himself that all is well, and give permission for further release. This is a stage, then, in that process, one in which he is holding his own. The period, however, can and should be shortened. Your free and open communication with each other on this subject can be of far more value than either of you realize, and it is really the only primary point of contention right now. That is, he is dispensing with the bliss behind the problems fairly well, so it is only on the issue of safety, and the safety of relaxation, that he is still concerned. There is considerable experimentation on the body's part when he sleeps, and it does try out positions that as yet he does not take when waking. Helpful massage on your part will also be of value because of what it implies. There is much material, of course, dealing with the hostage situation. For as it in a fashion echoes Ruber's own situation, so it also symbolizes the situations of many people, which is why the affair captures the attention of the world. Have Ruber used his recorded suggestions again for a while. Ruber feels that some of the threats he felt hidden in the world are now out in the open. To some extent or another, there are always social as well as private aspects to a person's state of health. The understandings that Ruber is now achieving are precisely the ones needed. What is left is reassurance that each step along the way is safe and supported. It is important for him to remember the aesthetics with which increased flexibility can come. It can come as easily as your income does. It is important that he not worry or project his difficulties into the future, and while he does much better at that than he did, he still needs the reminder. End of session. Rob asked, "Can I ask a question?" They said, "You may." Rob said, "I know we've gone over it many times, but I need some refreshing on why he's equated the lack of mobility with protection. Is it because the immobility keeps him inside the house where he feels safe, or?" They said, "The material has been given countless times. Give us a moment." He thought that immobility kept him at his desk working, free from any impulses to do otherwise, since for many years he believed that the spontaneous self must be harnessed toward creativity, and that, left alone, it would have too many other interests. At the same time, he feared that the spontaneous self could get him into difficulties, because he had no way of knowing where his own search might lead him, and particularly he feared that it might lead him into conflict with the rest of the world. The immobility protected him, so he thought, from encountering any such outside conflicts, and ensured his continuing creativity by cutting down other interests and distractions, and by organizing his time in a more economical fashion, or so it seemed. That is a simplified answer. The nuances which are important appear in many groups of sessions given in the past, and also include his reaction to attitudes of your own, which to some extent helped from and solidify his own ideas in those regards. End of session. Ra said, "Thank you very much." They said, "I bid you a fond good evening." Rob said, "The same to you, good night."